Today we're going to be covering the real story behind the Cannonball Run race, which was a film in 1981 starring Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, Dean Martin, you know the whole gang. It was originally a true race that was ran several times across the country from New York or sometimes Connecticut to Redondo Beach, California. I'm Foxy Cellars, and I love the art of storytelling. If you fancy fables, fiction, tall tales, and high adventure, this is the channel for you. Subscribe, and if you do, you'll get to see more of me and more of the stories that I have to tell. Okay, let's get into it. Now, there's a lot of really interesting facts about the story behind the real race and then the race that ended up in the movie, and a lot of them coincide. Like, for example, the ambulance was something that Brock Yates, the creator of it, did use as a decoy, or I should say as a disguise to get across the country. And there's a lot of interesting stories that happened with that. The Lamborghini that was in the movie was actually purchased by someone that intended to race the race and then never ended up doing that. But then it was the exact same car they used. That iconic car ended up being the car in the first movie of the black Lamborghini that you see. My big pillar moment, of course, was my wedding. I had it at the Portofino Hotel, which was the end zone for the Cannonball race. If you want to look at life as being this, search for happiness, love being one of the greatest things in happiness, that's where the big reward came. It was the end of my race, or I should say the beginning of a wonderful life. And the Cannonball Run and my life have that similar bond. I like talking about it, so here we go.
So let me start with this. What is the Cannonball Run?
Sir, the Cannonball is a race from Connecticut to your ass.
So there were no real rules. You could put any car you wanted in the race. There was no limit to the type of cars. You could use motorcycles. It just had to be a car that hit the streets. So there's no limits to the modifications of it. There's specifically no speed limit, of course. The simple rule was that you had to get from coast to coast in the shortest possible amount of time. Now, the name for the Cannonball Run, it was named after Irwin Cannonball Baker, who was a legendary motorcyclist. He was also a car racer in the early 20th century, and he had set dozens of coast to coast type of driving records. The first unofficial race occurred in 1971. And they would, the first one, and I think the second one, I'm not sure, it was ran from New York City from the Red Ball Garage to Redondo Beach, California, the Portofino Hotel, or Portofino Inn. Later, though, the Lock, Stock, and Barrel restaurant became the official starting point of the Cannonball Run, which was in Connecticut. So there wasn't any fixed route. You just had to get there as fast as you possibly could.
The race that was the Cannonball Run from the 1981 movie was officially known as the Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Dash, which is a bit of a mouthful. It was started by Brock Yates and Steve Smith. Brock Yates was a famous race car driver, and Steve Smith was a car magazine editor. They started the race together.
Brock himself competed in, several of the runs. And there were, multiple famous participants that were in the run. Dan Gurney was one that participated with Brock. Hal Needham, of course, who we'll get into. Steve Yogi Bear, and journalists, racers, and all kinds of thrill seekers from all types of walks of life. The first race, 1971, was not a race. It was just a dry run. Yates did it with his son. And then Steve Smith and Jim Williams, and they all embarked on the first run, and they did this in a Dodge van, and they named their Dodge van the Moon Trash No. 2, or Moon Trash 2. I don't know how they said it then. They completed the journey. It took them 40 hours, or almost 41 hours, and they said they averaged about 70 miles per hour. This really was more of a reconnaissance mission, just to set the stage and kind of figure out how they were going to do this. So 70 miles per hour doesn't sound that fast, but that's pretty good considering they must have driven through the night, I'm assuming. So in the 1972 race, so this was the first real official race, Brock drove with Dan Gurney, and they won the race in a Ferrari, and I believe it was much like the Ferrari that showed up in the movie. I don't think there's any correlation between it, the actual car itself, but they did it in a Ferrari.
Where is it going to sit?
So then there's the 1975 race, and interestingly, and this is where things that showed up in the movie were part of real life. There was an all-female team that had crashed. They were driving like a Cadillac limousine, and they crashed in Texas because one of the drivers had fallen asleep. The limo rolled over, and it was like nobody was injured, but I mean they demolished the thing, and the incident inspired them to include women, and the way they designed the women for the movie was to create these gorgeous women, and of course they drove in the Lamborghini that's in the movie. And then the final race had Dave Hines and Dave Yarborough win the race, and this is where they set the record. They set a record by completing it in 32 hours and 51 minutes, and they did this in a black Jaguar. And that was the last official race that ever occurred.
The script that was created was originally written by Brock Yates, but then Hal Needham came along, and Hal Needham was the stuntman for a lot of Burt Reynolds action movies, and even before that. But then he later went on and directed Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds. He stepped in, helped rewrite the script, and it became what we now know as the Cannonball Run, the famous comedy movie from 1981.
So Brock's original script, and it was titled Cannonball, with an exclamation point at the end of it, I believe. It was intended to be more of a serious depiction of the race itself. I mean, it had action and humor in it, but it was more detailing like this is what happened in the race. Later on, Hal Needham came along and helped him rewrite the script. Now, Hal, like I had said before, was notable for directing Smokey and the Bandit. Hal he was a paratrooper in the Army, like during the Korean War. After the war, at some point, he did a bunch of things, but then he became a stuntman in Hollywood, and he trained under John Wayne's stunt double, Chuck Robertson, and quickly became one of the top stuntmen in the film industry during the 60s. He was in How the West Was Won, The Warlord, and The Little Big Man. And eventually he moved on to be stunt coordinator, and he started directing like second unit. So he was involved heavily in the design of, in a film, like here's how this shot's going to go based on the stunt that was needed to be done. Almost like kind of a mini director, but just the action parts, which is really a great way to kind of segue into becoming a director as he did. Now, he was a pioneer in this industry, and I'm going to kind of go into this a little bit because it's interesting all that he did for the stunt industry, for the film industry, specifically stunts. So he developed airbags and other innovative type of equipment for the cars. He also developed what was called the Shotmaker Elite camera car and crane, which this revolutionized all location filming and earned him. So he got a scientific engineering award from the Academy of Motion Pictures of Art and Sciences. So it's kind of a big deal, if you ask me. He also invented what is now known as those explosive plates that were used with air pressure to launch a stunt performer into the air, triggering kind of like an explosion upon impact and creating this dramatic visual effect. If you've ever seen like episodes of the A-Team and they have those shots where like the guy would fly over your head and the cameraman would be kind of on the ground and they would go over it. They use stuff like that, which was developed by Hal Needham. Enter Burt Reynolds. Hal Needham befriended him, I think, this would have had to have been the early 70s, but this would have been early on in Burt Reynolds' career. Hal Needham ended up being a stuntman for him, so much so that they were so close that he lived in his guest house. Now, if any of you are familiar with Quentin Tarantino's movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you'll see a similarity. And Quentin Tarantino was quoted as saying he fashioned those two characters on the idea of Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham's relationship. So Needham, and there was a couple of other fellow stuntmen, Glenn Wilder and Ronnie Rondell. Ronnie was best known for the cover of the Pink Floyd album, Wish You Were Here. He's the guy on fire. He slightly different type of stunts. One's doing cars and action stuff like that. He's the pyrotechnia guy. These are all guys that worked with Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds and had a great relationship with him. So while writing the screenplay for Smokey and the Bandit, Reynolds had signed on and fought to have Needham direct it. And because of that, I mean, you got to give Burt Reynolds a lot of credit for Hal Needham's career. I mean, Hal Needham did all the work, of course, but you always need to know somebody. He knew Burt Reynolds, and Burt Reynolds pushed for him to get this directing gig. And Smokey and the Bandit is truly one of the most famous, especially from the 70s, the origination of the car comedy action stunt movies. And then, of course, this leads into Cannonball Run, which was directed by Hal Needham. And of course, he's going to get Burt Reynolds to star. And Burt Reynolds is the main star of the film, along with an unbelievable ensemble cast of Dom DeLuise, Farrah Fawcett. It's got Roger Moore in it, Jackie Chan, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. Terry Bradshaw's in it. I mean, it's got a pretty, deep cast. It came out in 1981 and was, released by 20th Century Fox. Now, notably, if you recall, the ambulance that's in this was not only was this the exact same ambulance that Brock Yates used in one of his runs of I think the 1979, so the last run that he did, they used that very specific plot point for this movie. And some of the things that happen, so like there's actually this scene where they're pulled over by the police and they slide open the door and there's the doctor, and the doctor actually talked the police kind of out of taking this whole thing down. But I believe one of the things he pointed out was this was the senator's, I think, son in the case of the real race, but in the movie it was Farrah Fawcett. So he said the wife of. But that actually did happen, and it wasn't something that they had rehearsed or anything. The doctor just said that out of the blue. And it's funny because they didn't have a lot of, just like in the movie, they didn't have a lot of faith in this doctor because he didn't really say much. They didn't know what his accolades were. He just slept the whole time. And then he just snapped out of it for this moment, got them out of this situation, and then they were on their way. And if you think about it, there was one of the themes of the movie are all these people dressed up, especially Roger Moore. He does a spoof of himself as James Bond. I think that was really just an allegory for all of the ridiculous characters that were in the real race. Many of them were dressed in disguises so that they could get from coast to coast. And if they were pulled over, had to deal with these situations and not had too many problems. Now, in the movie, of course, these antics are brought to a higher level and a lot more ridiculous, but it's a comedy movie. So of course they're going to bring it to the next level. And of course in the writing, they can exaggerate some of the evading of police and the real encounters that happened. And, whether they're radar jamming or, using their radios or, using decoys to evade the police, all kinds of stuff like that. So, some of these are things that happen. Most of them are embellishments, but all of them are steeped in some sort of realism or truth. I've always been such a fan of the movie. I get it. It's a guilty pleasure. It wasn't winning any Oscars or whatnot, but it's just, smile after smile after smile. And when you watch the movie, you feel like they had fun when they made this. They did. They did. I've seen it in interviews. And of course, if you watch the the deleted scenes at the end. I feel like they were the ones to spearhead that kind of concept of like doing your bloopers at the end of the movie when the credits roll. Because I can't think of anybody ever doing that before that. And it was done all the time after that. So I feel like they were the pioneers for that.
Time, I would take those rosary bleeds and stuff them up your nose.
These bleeds?
Those bleeds, yeah.
You gonna take these and shove them up?
I'd take these bleeds here.
I myself, always being a big fan of it, I used it. It was, back when I was doing a lot of stand-up comedy, I used it as my poster and I recreated it. And you can see here, like, some of these are comedians that are doing very well. And it just made it I'd put this poster up in before the show and look at it. And it just looked like we were going to have a lot of fun. And we did. This group was a lot of fun. So.
Myself, I did drive across the country from Boston, going similar routes, ending up in Redondo Beach. It took me much longer than I believe the record was 25 hours and 39 minutes was the original record for the coast to coast trip. I did it it would have been like 4 days, but I got hung up in Vegas for a little bit. And then, it ended up being like 6 or 7 or 8 days, whatever. But, I did do the race. It's just, I did the casual version of it.
So my wedding was held at the Portofino Inn. The hotel itself, it's been updated, of course. And like a lot of the backdrop looks very different. But the property itself is still kind of in the same format. The film shows multiple different backgrounds and it makes it look, I don't want to say larger, but like makes it look a lot more faceted by using all these different angles. But they pretty much shot everything just right at the side of the restaurant right there at the Portofino Inn. And the restaurant that's right there, that's primarily the main location that they shot from. They just moved the camera in different ways and made it look all kinds of different. So like you can see the harbor in some shots, you can see the wall in other shots, you can see the hotel, you can see the restaurant. It just depends on where they placed the cameras. Now, we did our like groom shoot right on these docks, just at this exact harbor. We just walk down on the docks and you can kind of see like you can see the power plant in the background. And of course, me being the massive Van Halen fan that I am, we attempted to emulate the cover of Van Halen's Women and Children First. And, I'm competing with Diamond Dave and Eddie, and it wasn't easy, but I think we pulled it off. I don't know. You guys tell me which one did it better. Now, there's also this pillar that commemorates the race, and it's right in front of the hotel. I don't remember it when I was there, but I went back and took a picture, and here it is. So, there's not a lot of huge fanfare over Cannonball Run there, but they do have that one little thing. I think every time I go there, I always think of the Cannonball Run. Anytime I think of my wedding, I also think of the importance of it. My wife and I go to dinner, I think almost every year. Sometimes we do something else, but like usually we'll go to that restaurant for our anniversary and have dinner. The restaurant's fantastic. It's high end. It's it's a little pricey. But it's a nice classy place, and it's got a beautiful view of the harbor right there. So like if you are one of those people that live in the Los Angeles area, it's definitely worth a visit. Go check it out. And they got a lot of options, and it's, brings back wonderful memories for me. So in conclusion, both the race and the movie, in my eyes, I feel captured a uniquely American love of the open road, freedom, adventure, camaraderie, teamwork, and ultimately pushing the limits, the legal limits, that is, of, what people can do, and, the competitiveness of this race from, across the country. So the next time you watch the Cannonball Run and laugh your ass off, because you will, and they're over the top antics and chaos. Just remember, it all started with this group of guys, these car gearheads, racers, whatever you want to call them, who really did go from sea to shining sea, Connecticut to Redondo Beach, and did this race. So as much as it seems like a ridiculous farce, it was a true story.
She's doing the king of the world over there. She's the king of the world! Save me! Take me with you! I want to thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'm Foxy Cellars. If you would, click subscribe. You'll get keyed into videos just like this that I do in the future. We'll see storytelling. Comment even if you would. You might have additional thoughts that I didn't even include or I didn't think of, or that just information that you have. Or you might even have contrasting opinions about some of the things that we talked about today. So I look forward to seeing your comments, and everybody be good. Thanks.